Hey guys, in this video we'll be discussing the features of ES6 or the ECMAScript 6. Okay, so why do we need this? For a better writing of ReactJS code, because we depend on a lot of these ES6 features. Like we might be using classes, we might be using arrow functions, we might be using hell lot of other things, right? But these are very helpful when you actually write the code in the latest JavaScript version. Okay, we'll also understand what is ES6, what is ECMAScript and all of those. But in this video, mainly we'll be covering topics like var versus let versus const. So these are the different variable declaration types. Like you can declare a variable using var, let, const. So what is the difference between those? Okay, so let and const have been introduced in the ES6 release. Okay, so there are ES5, ES4, ES3, etc. But we'll understand what is ECMAScript. And then we'll discuss about the arrow functions. What are the new arrow functions which have introduced in ES6? Then we'll discuss about the array and object destructurization. So how is this useful and why is it important to know while you're working on React.js, right? Then we'll discuss about the new spread operator. What is spread operator and how can you use it? Then we'll understand template strings, because right now in React.js we'll be writing both HTML and JavaScript together. So this might come in handy. And default values. So when you call a function, how you can use default values so that the function can be called in multiple times, multiple ways. Then we'll understand the module system in JavaScript, like imports and exports. What are the default exports? What are the normal exports, right? After that, we'll be looking at the latest ternary and nullish operators and coalesce operators as well. So these are the major things which you need to have a strong grip on before moving to React.js coding part, right? Yeah. Then we need to understand, or most of the people actually get confused a lot. Hey, what is ECMAScript and what is JavaScript? Why do we call it as ES6, ES5? What is the connection between these two, right? We need to understand this part very clear because it will be a good question in any interviews. And also understanding this will give you a clear idea on how to look at things in the aspect of ECMA and JavaScript. So see, ES1 was released in 1997, 1998. So currently we are in ES 2017. But what is the connection between ECMAScript and JavaScript? Okay, so ECMAScript is the standard which JavaScript follows. Like for an example, a bike engine. So Yamaha bike engines, they specify certain standards that okay, BS4, BS5, BS6. This is the engine standard which you need to follow, and based on that engine standards, you can implement any number of bikes, right? So motor vehicle company decides, or the one who is authorizing those motor vehicles, they design the standard that okay, here BS4 vehicle should have this much pollution control, this much that. So different specifications, braking oil, all of these. So ECMAScript is such a company which sets the standards, and whoever is implementing that particular standards needs to obey that. Like ECMAScript has set a standard, and the different implementations of ECMAScript should follow them, right? So there are multiple implementations of ECMAScript, out of which JavaScript is a very popular one. So JavaScript is the implementation of ECMAScript. It is not subset, it is not superset or anything. It follows the rules set by the company, ECMAScript. There are many other scripting languages which obeyed the standards of ECMAScript, out of all of these, JavaScript is the quite popular one, right? So this is the main thing, guys. You need to be very clear on this part because it might confuse you a lot. Now whatever features we were discussing, ES6 features, those features were released as part of ECMAScript, and slowly JavaScript has implemented those features. It's just like you define a class and there are multiple other classes interfaces, they are implementing this interface, right? So even browsers, so sometimes you observe that something works in Google and something doesn't work in Mozilla Firefox or Safari, because even those are the implementations of ECMAScript. So Chrome is called as V8 engine, and SpiderMonkey is the engine of Mozilla Firefox. So it takes some time for when an ECMAScript new version is released, all the browsers won't adapt to it quickly. So it is believed that Chrome is the fastest one which is implementing the ECMAScript new features. That's why some features work in Chrome, some features won't work in SpiderMonkey, that is Firefox or Safari or the Internet Explorer. So this is the connection between ECMAScript, JavaScript and the browsers. Now you should have a clarity. Okay, this is not working in Firefox but working in Chrome. This is because the Firefox has not yet implemented the latest features of ECMAScript. Okay, so now we'll look into the different ECMAScript features like we discussed, let versus const versus var, right? So let me create a small file, index.js. Okay, so first we'll understand var let const. Okay, var is of global scope. Okay, we'll discuss what is global scope, whereas let and const are block scope. Similarly, const are block scope, right? So when you declare a variable using the var keyword, that particular variable is accessible in the entire global. Okay, whereas let and const are in a block scope. It means, what is a block? Anything which is inside this curly braces. So if you simply see var a equal to 10 and I am defining a new block, new function test, okay, and console.log a, right? So now if I execute this code, node index. So how do you execute the code? Node index, that's it. So I didn't call the function test. Yeah. So now this 10 is being accessed from the global scope. Okay. So now let me overwrite it. Let a equal to 20. Okay. Now if you see the scope of this a equal to 20 is only constrained within this block. Okay. If I simply do the console.log a, then this a refers to the global context and this a refers to the block context. But if you observe, when the variable is declared in the global context, even inside the functions, that value. So first it checks, okay, do I have anything in my block context? If I have, then I'll access that. Otherwise, I will go to the global variable, right? So if you see here now, both are referring to the global, and now I overridden it with the block scope. So it is referring to the blocked variable. So first console.log a refers to 10 and second refers to the 20. So if you want to create a new block, it is as simple as this, right? So now whatever values or let or const variables declared inside this block are not accessible over here. So if I say let b equal to 30 and I want to access that particular variable in this block, right? So console.log a comma B, right? So if I do this now, see, B is not defined. It means the scope of this variable B is just constrained between this flower brackets, which is a block. So blocked scope variables are accessible only in a block which they have defined, whereas variables defined with var, they are accessible from anywhere. So if I define var B equal to 40, and now if I execute this code, so first in this block, it checks, okay, I don't have any blocked variables, so I'll go into the global context. So see, now there is no error. This B refers to the 40. Now let's understand the difference between let and const. So both let and const are blocked scope variables, blocked scope keywords, right? Now what is the difference between let and const? So difference between let and const is that let can be changed anytime in the code, whereas const, as the name itself says, that it cannot be changed later in the code. And there is one more restriction. It should be always initialized at the time of declaration. So this is one more constraint. So what is it? First thing, let can be changed anytime in the code, whereas const, it cannot be changed later in the code, and also it should be always initialized at the time of declaration, right? So what do I mean by this? So example, let A. Now I just declared this. So here it is called as declaration. I haven't initialized the variable yet. Now A equal to 10. This is called as initialization, right? So this is possible. So this particular syntax or this way of declaration and initialization is possible for the variables declared using let keyword. But if you do the same thing, constant B, right? So it is already throwing me an error. Const declarations must be initialized. So you cannot do this with the const. So it throws an error. So it's already saying const declarations must be initialized at the time of declarations only. So this is one of the main difference between let, var and const. So it is always recommended to use let and const because they don't pollute the global and you are not surprised from where the variable is getting accessed, right? So if you keep on declaring var variables, so those variables are now doing all the magic, like I don't know from where the variable has come into the picture, and all of those confusions will be present. Okay, so let's name this function as let versus const. Okay, so console.log let A equal to 10, constant B equal to 20. So in this only A and B are accessible, right? Now let's move on to the next ES6 feature. Okay, that is, we'll discuss about array slash object destructuring. Okay, so what is this, right? And why is this useful? So destructuring means you're trying to access only a few properties inside the array or object. Okay, so let me explain that. Constant array equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And I'll declare another object, constant object equal to name Vasudev, place, so Hyderabad, and company code sapiens and country India, right? Now what is object destructurization? So let's imagine that these two data, so it is a big data, so this contains lot of data and it is coming from the backend. So you made an API call and you got the data. So technically you're not interested in all of these keys. Okay, so see, function access data, this access data function is not at all interested in all of the keys, all of the data which we have fetched from the backend. In that cases, what I can do is object. So this is the syntax for object destructurization. So here I am declaring a constant object. Now I am destructuring this particular object. How do I do that? I am just trying to access only the name property from the object and I am ignoring all of the other data. So this way, place, right? Now if I do console.log name comma place, I'll be accessing only in this function's memory. I'm not storing all the data which I have fetched from the backend because I don't want to occupy too much of space, as my function is only interested in these two properties, right? So now this way I'm trying to access only the data which I'm interested in. So this is called as object destructuring, right? Similarly, let's define another array. Okay, let's define another array which is array of objects, right? So let me copy those, right? And name Pratyush, place Delhi, and company and India. So here this is an array of objects. So this is an array of objects, right? Name Charu, place Gurgaon, and company and country. So now this is an array of objects which I have received from somewhere. Maybe I'm not sure where from. It can be from any place, right? But technically I don't want all of these objects, but I only want the data which is located in the first or maybe second or third, right? So in that case, how can I destructure my object, right? So C is equal to array, and now I'm just trying to access only this particular value and I'm naming it as Vasudev, and I'm ignoring rest all others, right? So if I console.log Vasudev and execute this function, so from this array I have only accessed this particular object. I am not interested in the other two values, so only I am interested in the first index element, right? So if I now execute this, access data, see, so here from the object destructurization I just access the name and place properties, hence I got name and place, and in the array, instead of getting all the details, I have collected the first element and I named it as Vasudev. It means I have created a variable of name Vasudev and I have destructured the array. And what is the syntax for destructuring the array? You using the const and then the square brackets and then the array which you want to destructure. So this way I access the first element, and if I want to access the second element I can simply do this, right? So I'm currently interested in first and second properties. So this concept was used in the React hooks later on. So array destructurization is useful over there. So see, I was able to access two elements and I'm ignoring the third element. Just imagine you got lakhs of data and you have sorted them on based on some property so that it always comes on the first. So you don't have to store everything in the memory, but simply access the first element, right? So object destructurization, you use the flower brackets, the same way how you define an object, and array destructurization, you define the square brackets, right? So this both are very important and we'll be using them a lot going forward in our discussions, right? So next important ES6 concept is that spread operator. Spread operator. So what is spread operator? Okay, so spread operator works on both. Spread operator works on both arrays slash objects. Okay, so let's take an example of, so there is a use case where you want all of these properties in a new object. In addition to all of these properties, you want to add some extra information. Okay, so let's say address. So here I will put it as person object, and here I am creating a new object, right? Now in the address object, I want all the properties of the person. Additionally, I want to add few properties. So either I copy paste all of this, right? But in programming, while the program is running, you cannot actually copy paste, right? So you clone it, you copy it using some function. But using the spread operator, you can simply do triple dot person, okay? And you can add another property like state Telangana, right? And zip code 501510. So now when I console.log address, what it has done is this three triple dots person, it spread across all the keys in the object and it copied all of those objects into this address object. Now when I run this address, so see, address now contains all the properties from the person and also the new properties inside the address. So this is the best use case to copy an object, to clone or copy the object. The same thing will apply to the arrays as well. Is equal to, so I want all the properties inside this array. So I simply do dot array, right? And I'll define a new element, Iron Man, right? And place equal to USA. So now this arrays will contain all the elements in the array 1. Also additionally the new object which we have added. So spread operator is used to copy or clone the object or an array. So this is also going to be a very useful operator while learning our ReactJS. So there are lot of applications of this spread operator which we will be discussing right now. Okay, so the first use case is, let's say in the previous example, what I have done, I have destructured name, place, company and country because this function is interested. But if I still want access to all other properties, let's say there are hundreds of keys over here, right? Then what I can do is simply triple dot rest. Now what will happen is name and place are destructured and copied to a new variable name, that is name and place, and it again creates a new object with rest of all the properties. So see, when I do this, name, place and triple dot of rest, so rest will be a new object with the two case, company and country. So let me do that. Let me call this function access data, and I'll execute the code. So I got an error. Okay, I need to rename this to person, right? Yeah. So now when I execute this, see, so name and place are two different variables which we have accessed and destructured from the person object, but rest is an object. So in the spread operator can be used to access rest all properties inside the object. Similarly, the same case will apply over here. So in the array destructurization also, you just want the rest elements, right? You just want the first property of the first index element of the array, and you want rest of all others in another variable. So you can simply do this. So now when I execute this, what happens is array is destructured in two ways. First, the first variable, first index element is stored in this value, and the rest all elements are created in a new array. So rest all elements will be stored in the form of array. So see, first is an object, and second, whatever other elements are present in the array, they are they formed into a new array. So this is one of the use case of the spread operator. So in case if you want to, you still want the elements present in the object but as a new object, okay, so then you can simply do this using the spread operator. There are a lot of applications of spread operator in the same way. We'll discuss a lot of them in the going sessions, right? So when you want to declare a function which accepts a lot of multiple arguments. So if you want to define a function which takes multiple arguments, then spread operator is going to be a huge help to you. But yeah, spread operator is one thing. And the second and the next operator is template strings, right? So if you want to define a string, some string, okay, but that string is combination of dynamic values and also the text. So it means that now I want to define a string like this: hi, welcome, the key from the person, that is person.name. Okay, so how do I do this? So usually what we used to do like this: hi, welcome, and then plus person.name, then plus to our sessions, right? So now what we are doing, we are concatenating the string with a variable name, that is, it is going to print hi, welcome Vasudev to our sessions. So if I console.log some string and I execute this, so see, there was no space given. Yeah. So this is the way we used to concatenate string, but this is going to become real messy when you want to concatenate lot of things, right? So to avoid or to ease down this particular process, what we have is the template strings, that is hi, welcome. So now the operator which I am using is this, which is present left to the number 1 on your keypad. So shift left to the number 1 in your keypad. Okay, so hi, welcome. Now if you want to dynamically access any JavaScript variables or any variable in the string, you simply put the dollar symbol and the parenthesis. Now I can simply do person dot name to our sessions. So both of these two are same, but there is no opening and closing multiple times. You're not opening the quotes multiple times. There is no plus symbol, and also it looks a lot cleaner now. See, it looks like a one simple. So you just put it in this new template string, and whenever you want to access any particular variable, you can directly access it using the dollar and parenthesis operator. So node index new string. Yeah, so both of these are pretty much same. So this operator is going to be lot of useful to you, because we need to show dynamic data on the UI so that you can directly access the JavaScript variables, right? And the next operator which we are going to discuss is next concept which we are going to discuss is arrow functions. Arrow functions, right? So arrow functions are the new way of writing the functions in JavaScript. So we have got arrow functions from the release of ES6. So what are the arrow functions and what are the different cases arrow functions can be really helpful, right? So arrow functions are the syntactic improvement in defining a function. Okay, so let me do this. Function square. So this is a new function, let's say. So how do you write a function? Function square, and this is going to return a cross a dot a cross a, right? So when I call this function 2, so it gives me 4, right? So now the same function using the arrow function syntax can be written this way. Constant square equal to a arrow a star a. So now both of these are same. So I'll define this square arrow. Okay. So see, now you don't have to use the function keyword, okay, and if no return statement and no parenthesis required, right? So see, 4,9. So this is the new way of writing arrow functions. So you can use arrow functions for a simpler syntax and it looks pretty clean, only single line, right? So even in arrow functions, we have different cases. So how do you write an arrow function? We'll see. Okay. Case 1. Single argument and single statement. That is function body. So in that function body, there is only one single statement. Right? Case 2. Multiple arguments and single statement, right? So we'll see in all of these cases how normal function and arrow function differ. Case 3, both multiple arguments and multiple statements, right? So first the case 1. So in the case 1, we have just seen, right? Function, and the arrow function way of writing this square is a arrow operator and a star a, right? So this is the case 1. And next the case 2, which is multiple arguments but single statement. So here multiply a comma b, and the statement would look like a into b. So the same function can be written using the arrow function syntax in this way. So when there are multiple arguments, here we have only single argument. So when there are multiple arguments, you need the parenthesis around the arguments. But when there is only single statement, then you can directly say a cross b. So what is the difference between these two is that when there is a multiple arguments, you have to put the parenthesis, and when there is only one argument, you don't have to put the parenthesis around the arguments. Okay, so the difference is multiple arguments, parenthesis is required. So no parenthesis and no flower brackets. We'll discuss this. Requires parenthesis, no flower brackets. Now the case 3, right? Case 3, function perimeter or some function, okay, some function a comma b comma c, right? In this case, multiple statements are present. Okay, so like this, I'm just console.logging and I'm just returning a plus b plus c, right? So this type of functions, how do we write it? So we have multiple statements and multiple arguments. So in this case, it will be constant perimeter arrow equal to parenthesis is required, and arrow you also require the flower brackets. So now in this case, it will be something like this. So when in the case 3, when it has multiple arguments and multiple statements, how does it look like? The same way. So whatever the function body is present, you directly put it over here, and multiple arguments means parenthesis. So that is the difference, or how to write an arrow function, or how to convert an arrow a normal function into an arrow function. So if I give this, and if I ask you to convert into arrow function, you will write it this way. And if I give such statements, you can do this. It is not wrong if you do this in all the cases. Return a cross b. You can always do this. Nobody is stopping you. So you can put the parenthesis. You won't get any error, right? But I'm just showing the shortcut way of doing the things, right? So even this is possible. Even this is possible. And yeah, so, and apart from the syntactic extension, what other important thing which arrow function does is, and which is an advanced JavaScript concept, is that the value of this remains constant in the arrow functions. This is because in the JavaScript ecosystem, the value of this changes dynamically. I mean, it changes during the runtime. So this was a very, very big problem. So usually the value of this in a function, points to the context where it has been called. Right? So the value of this remains constant in the arrow functions. Okay. As I'm saying, so the value of this keyword changes during the runtime in a normal function, whereas the value of this remains constant in the arrow function. So this is the one of the most important reason why arrow function was introduced. But right now this knowledge will be really helpful in using the arrow function, because we'll be using lot of arrow functions going forward, right? And the next important concept which we are going to discuss is that module system in JavaScript, right? So what is module system? So you can import and export a function in JavaScript or anything, any variable. So let me define another file, temp.js. Okay, so I can export a function from here. Export function sum. Okay, export function sum a plus b, right? So it takes 2 arguments. So now I'm exporting a function that is called as sum from this file. So now wherever I want to use that function, I can simply import it. Import sum from temp. So if I do this, now I will get the sum function which is defined in another file into my project, into my file. Okay, so in this manner we have 2 types of exports possible in JavaScript ES6, that is export and export default, right? So export means you can do multiple exports from the same file. If you are using just the export keyword, it means you can do multiple export from the same file, like this: export function difference a comma b, right? A return a minus b. So multiple, if you are exporting it, you export in this way, and you can export multiple functions or multiple objects or anything, right? But export default, this keyword can be used only once in your file. So export default, and I can export a multiply function, right? So here I am returning a star b. So if you do this way, it means now if I want to import, yeah, so export default function, export function, and export function. So here, how are you differentiating and accessing these functions in the other file? Sum different. So when you are importing the functions which are exported with the normal export function, then you access it inside the parenthesis. Okay, but when you are accessing the default export, so you will do it like this. like this. So now see, for the members which are exported with default, export default, they don't need parentheses around them. But for the members which are exported with export keyword, only export keyword, they need parentheses. So this is one of the important thing. So when do you use export default and when do you use simple export? So if there are less important things in that file, so you do it with a normal export so that you can export multiple things. But if you want to export only one variable and which is very, very important in that file, you will use the export default keyword. So this is the one of the important concept in ES6 which has been introduced. And the last thing which we have to discuss in the ES6 is default parameters inside the function, right? So let me take the example of this function. Okay, so in this function, if I simply place like this, equal to 10 and equal to 20. So case 1, perimeter. Now I can call this function in 3 ways. So here in this case, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 2, c is equal to 3, right? So since we have passed the arguments explicitly, the values inside this function will be a equal to 1, b equal to 2 and c equal to 3. And if I don't pass the c value 1, 2, in this case the values will be a equal to 1 and b equal to c. Since there is no third argument passed, the third argument will be default value, that is equal to 10. So here the values of a, b and c will be a equal to 1, b equal to 2, c equal to 10. Same way, the last way to do it is you can pass only one argument. In that case, a will be equal to 1, b is equal to 20 and c is equal to 10. So this way you can define the default argument so that based on the requirement you can keep calling the function in a different ways. So default values are really helpful in a lot of your development process. You will understand, you will come across those situations, right? And one combination of spread operator and the functions is that there is another important application. So I want to define a function, right? Sum. I want to define a function which can take any number of arguments, right? How can I do that? So you can simply do like this, dot 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 args. So now what will happen? Console.log args, right? So if I call the sum with 1, 2 and sum with 1, 2, 3, in both of these cases, this function only will be called, but the args will be an array. So if I execute this, let me pull it out since we are not using. Yeah. So see. Let me remove these statements as well. Yeah. Yeah. So the args in the first call, it is 1, 2, and in the second call, in the 1, 2, 3. So in both of these cases, what you observe is that both the args is casted itself to as an array. So with this spreading operator, now you accessed all of the arguments and you are storing them in an array. So this way if you want to define a function which can take multiple arguments, or you don't know how many number of arguments it's gonna take, then you can simply define this. So now if I want to sum all of those, args.reduce sum comma current and sum plus current equal to this. Now if I console.log, so see, it for when I have defined a function which will take multiple arguments, and the function's agenda is to copy all the sum all the arguments. So 1 plus 2 3, 1 plus 2 plus 3 6. So this is one of the important use case of the spread operator, wherein you can define a function which takes multiple arguments. Same way, the last important operators in the ES6 is the nullish and coalesce operator. Okay, nullish and coalesce operator. So what are these, right? So let me pull an example from the above, right? So I'll copy this address object, or I'll just access the address object. Okay, so if I do this, let's say my address object is coming from backend. I'm not really sure if there is a key called as argument continent. Okay, so I'm not really sure, but actually it shouldn't be an error. If it is present, it's okay. If it is not present, then I'm sure, because sometimes the backend data is returning the data, sometimes it is not returning the data. So in these cases, if you run this code, now it is throwing as this address dot continent, right? And same way, if I use this operator, okay, yeah, so these are the different ES6 features which we have discussed, and all of these will be really handy to you, and I hope you understand all of these properties and these different functionalities in the ES6 and get ready to use all of them in your ReactJS development.